This is Deploy Asana Successfully, the new podcast for Asana Champions with my friend Bastien Siebman. Today we're going to explain how to deploy Asana successfully and what you have to do in the early stages. Welcome to Deploy Asana Successfully. Okay, good morning everyone. Good morning, Bastien, how are you?
Good morning, I'm good. Excited to record something new.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Deploy Asana Successfully. This is a new format. After one season of our Peak Productivity podcast, we rethought the way to generate content that could be valuable for Asana professionals, Asana champions, those who are in the process of deploying Asana in your organization. And the idea that today becomes a reality is this podcast called Deploy Asana Successfully. Thank you, Bastien, for sharing again this adventure with me. Bastien, for those that don't know you, could you explain a little bit what do you do for a living?
I deploy Asana successfully for a living. I created a company called I.Do. We are an Asana solutions partner, and our job is to deploy Asana successfully. We have a team of about 15 people spread across Europe, and we also have someone in the US. We've worked with more than 500 clients around the world, and we've helped them deploy and use Asana successfully.
When did you start deploying Asana?
Yeah, good question. I think about 10 years ago, I chose Asana as my own productivity tool. And then I started to get better at using Asana for myself. And then I actually realized by going, I think it was the Google community at the time, the Google group that existed. I actually realized that I was quite good and quite knowledgeable compared to the other people. And that's when I started to help people online. And then one day, someone asked me if they can actually pay me for my time. So that's how my consulting side hustle started. So that's when I started deploying Asana. This was, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, I think. And then slowly did more and more deployments, always with very small clients. And then I partnered up with my co-founder, Julian. We created I.Do, and then we grew and grew. And now we are about 15 people.
Beautiful. On my side, I'm David Jané. I'm the founder at Volcanic. Volcanic has been using Asana since the day it was launched. That was more than 12 or now 13, maybe 13 years ago. And it's a very, very similar path. Becoming an expert using Asana ourselves. Some of our customers asked for some help to deploy Asana in their own organizations. And it has been in the past 2.5 years that this has become a business unit itself, because luckily there are more and more companies that want to deploy Asana internally, and they need the help from seasoned professionals that have fought in the past to deploy Asana in different types of organizations. And very, very happy to do this. I always say that this is something that I would probably pay to do. So being paid to help companies to deploy Asana is fantastic. And the objective for those who are listening us in this first episode, let us explain what you can take from this podcast. This will be weekly conversations. Probably it doesn't matter if you don't follow the order of the episodes. We want to have evergreen content that it doesn't matter if you listen in the order we record it or in inverse order. And we want to share our experience and to generate some valuable information, some valuable insights in the process of deploying Asana in your own team, or if you want to become, as Bastien and myself have explained, if you want to become an Asana consultant, a professional Asana consultant. One of the things that comes to my mind is how has evolved the role of an Asana consultant during the years. Is it different now? Besides of the experience, you said that more than 500 companies trusted you at IDO to deploy Asana. But what have been the main changes from a few years ago to now? What are the things that are different today than they were at the beginning?
I think so I have three main differences in my case. The first one is, as you gain experience and as your team grows, you also attract bigger clients, and with bigger clients come different challenges. For example, bigger companies, they expect you to be an expert in change management, for example, which wouldn't be the case with small teams. So usually we are brought in as Asana experts, and we usually end up being project management experts, sometimes management experts, sometimes change management experts, which we are not on paper, but we do have experience and we've seen lots of use cases, so we can share this experience. I think the other big change is that the tool itself became quite complex. It's huge. There's lots of new features, and Asana releases a ton of stuff every month. So it has become quite a complicated task to keep up with everything that's happening. And there are some tests at the same time as new features being released. And in that mix, you also put all the different plans, starter, advanced, enterprise, and you also add some change in pricing, change in rules. All of that makes it a bit hard to understand the features you have access to, the features you will have access to, the limits that apply to your account, and how much you pay, and how all of that is actually structured. So I think that's the big change. You go from helping someone using my tasks to actually helping a company decide on a plan, decide if they want to use AI, and how to get the most out of the tool across many different departments. Would you agree?
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. It has changed. On my side, I must confess that probably the biggest change is that the very first customers were small organizations, and it was, I would say, exciting because they were in the process of growing the company and at the same time deploying some SOPs and putting some script in their operations, and Asana helped them a lot. Now we have more corporate clients, more policies, more politics in the company, and it's became more difficult. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of someone who is in the process of let's go to an earlier stage in the process where you're feeling the pain that your organization is managing their work using emails, managing their work using Excel spreadsheets, or maybe boards in their office with post-it messages, and you are commissioned to decide which software you want to implement in the company to manage the work. Which would be the stages that you have to go through when it comes to deciding if Asana is the right tool? And once there's a go, what are the next stages? From a bigger picture, not we can go in details later.
Yeah, I think before going in and comparing tools, I think you need three things. You need to make sure you have leadership support. So you need to make sure that whatever tool you pick, then leadership will support you and push this initiative internally. You also need to make sure there's a budget, because a tool like this does have a cost. It's not cheap, and also you usually need to work with a partner to help with deployment, so this has services cost attached. And also you need to make sure you have time, because we've had clients who were so overwhelmed they did not even have time to do the deployment itself. So you need to make sure that you have time to step back, deploy Asana while the business is running. And usually that means having at least one champion, sometimes several champions, with a bandwidth that is saved just in order to be able to deploy a tool, and then still have some bandwidth to help people, train people, improve processes as you go. I think those are the first steps before evaluating the different tools you could look at.
Yeah, we're using the term Asana Champion. This is something that internally it's used quite often, and an Asana Champion is the person that it doesn't depend on the position of that person in the company. It can either be a C-level person
Yeah.
or someone in the operations team. It's the one that for its background or for what he or she likes will be the one that learns faster, the one that will be the go-to guy when there are questions, the person that probably will be the connection between the consultant and the company. So it's the probably the advantage, the designated survivor when it comes to Asana concepts.
Yeah, I think this is
Okay.
someone that likes to learn, likes to teach, and likes to get their hands dirty, because this is what's going to happen when we do workshops. We will go in, we will prototype, we will test, we will fail, we will test again. So that person needs those three traits.
How if how would you identify when you have like a bunch of people of an organization in the first call or in do you want to designate the Asana champion yourself or it spontaneously
Yeah, usually
arises
it's
from
obvious. I don't know what's your experience, but usually it's obvious. People know exactly. Once you explain what a champion is, the people usually know who it's going to be. Those people might be reluctant to become champions because they still do not have support from leadership as well as bandwidth. But once they do, I think they would be very happy to actually become champions. And just for the anecdote, at least one of our team member, actually two of our team members right now that we hired were previously champions for our clients. So I'm not saying we are going around and hiring our clients' employees, but it happened in two cases, and they were really good at what they were doing internally, and they actually realized you could make a living by teaching Asana full time. So we were very happy to welcome them. But to answer your question, it's usually obvious, and people know exactly who should be a champion and who shouldn't.
yeah, another quite common scenario is when a company that is using Asana, someone leaves that company and goes to another employer. Um, if she or he had a good experience using Asana, probably she or he will populate the new organization with Asana, and then it's an obvious choice that it will become the Asana champion, that person that has already gone through a deployment process in a previous work, and it helps a
Yeah,
lot because they've gone through all these stages. You
Is-
mentioned,
yeah, and yeah. Just before you move on, we might be able to do an entire episode on this, but I think sometimes we forgot that this champion is actually doing a career move by becoming champions. And if Asana deployment fails, they might actually be hurt career wise. So sometimes there's a lot at play when they deploy Asana. So we are there to help them, support them, show them the way, and also show to their leadership that they're doing a good job. We really need to make sure we support them in this journey because it's not always easy to deploy Asana, and there's a lot at stake sometimes.
yeah, totally. I think that in every process, it's important to highlight that it's a teamwork. It's very difficult for an organization that doesn't have the right process or the right system to
Yeah.
deploy Asana. The numbers of companies that renew their licenses after 1 year, it's much different. Those that have gone through the proper process and those that do it by themselves, usually because they don't have this conversation. And I want to go back for a moment to the three uh, conditions you mentioned: having the right sponsor, that has to be the highest possible in the hierarchy of the organization, having the money and having the time. In my experience, the one that usually it's more difficult to find, it's time. How would you estimate the amount of time that requires, let's say, a 50 people team, how much they should invest in terms of time to deploy Asana successfully?
Yeah, it's a very hard question. I think for a 50 people team, I think it's fair to say that if you have one champion, they need to dedicate at least 1 hour per day to doing
I agree.
Asana trainings, Asana improvements, follow the roadmap. If you can't find 1 hour per day to do this, then I think deployment will most likely fail, unless the team is really autonomous and they can learn by themselves, but at least 1 hour per day. We usually, when people ask us how many champions do you need, we usually tell them one champion for 10 to 15 members is good. So a 50 people team, that would be 3 to 4 champions, especially if you have different locations, different countries, different languages. You want to make sure that every single employee has a champion sitting not far away from them. But yeah, a couple of hours per week for sure.
Yeah, you went to the bottom of the. I would say this would be a must, like 1 hour per day. I would say it's nice to have like maybe 3-4 hours per day, especially if they have a lot of different processes that they want to migrate to Asana. Which
that would
leads
be
me
for the
to,
implementation phase then,
yeah,
like part
yeah,
time. Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
in
yeah.
my case, that was when you are on cruise control, like 1 hour per day, just to train new people coming in and improve existing stuff. But I agree with you in terms of deployment. Initially, you do need a couple of hours per week just to deploy.
Okay, let's go back to the that potential Asana champion that wants to deploy Asana in their organization. We said that before starting, you must make sure you have the right sponsor, you have money, you have time. Okay, let's say you check all the boxes. What's the next stage? What would you recommend to do when you have the money, the sponsor, and the time?
I think you need to create a list. Doesn't have to be very long list, but a list of things you expect the tool to do. The tool you choose might not be able to cover everything, but at least it's going to help you compare the different tools. Once you have that list, make sure that someone that knows the tool really well helps you check the boxes, because we've seen that too often. People will check the boxes based on what the website says, and it's sometimes the website is a bit too optimistic. Sometimes the website is lacking information as well, or is not up to date with the roadmap. Sometimes exactly what you need is actually coming next month, but the website doesn't say so. So make sure that that list is reviewed by someone that knows the tool really well. And then once you have your list and you were able to compare different tools, I guess you can decide on a short list of tools. I don't know, maybe 1, 2, or 3 tools, and just have some tests, like a dry run. Asana has a 30-day trial you can use. And once you start a trial, then you need to make sure you get the most out of the trial to test everything that you need.
Proof of concept, yes or no?
I guess that depends. I would say a third
I have
of
mixed
our
feelings about.
clients.
I have
I would
mixed feelings
say
about it.
I think a third of our clients do proof of concept. It takes longer, it costs money, and especially if you do a POC with multiple tools, it's like a lot of time and money invested. If you have a conviction, if you feel like Asana is the right fit, if you've talked with an expert, they've shown you in a demo space that it does work, and you trust them, I would say just go for it. If everything else, if you ticked all the boxes, I don't think a POC will help, except putting some delay on the actual deployment, because this is literally what the POC is. Usually it's on a very small scope. People will keep using other tools at the same time. And then 3 months later, you regroup and you decide. So you just lost 3 months. So if the tool is the right one, you lost 3 months. But sometimes it's also a good way for us to convince the client that the tool is the right one, because we want to show them through the POC that it's the right tool. But the POC has to be comprehensive enough and cover enough use cases so that you will trust the results. If you test on a very small scope, you might decide that Asana is not powerful enough, but it might be your fault because you chose a very small scope and you were not willing to attract more people. And also, one last point before you jump in, Asana is very powerful when everybody collaborates, like when you have all the different departments. If you only pick one, they will be very frustrated, especially if their daily work involves other people, because if they are not part of the POC, you won't be able to collaborate with them, and you might actually conclude that Asana is not the right tool, even though it's actually quite powerful once everybody is inside.
I totally agree with this last point, and that's probably the main caveat that I will put on the table when it comes to proof of concept. The biggest value from Asana comes when it's used across the organization, and the marketing team can delegate tasks to finance or accounting with HR. When it comes to a proof of concept, usually is 1 or 2 processes in one, or in the best case 2 departments. So it's quite a limited experience, and maybe the outcome of that proof of concept will not deliver the value expected when you're planning to deploy Asana. So I think it's very important to understand these caveats prior to starting a proof of concept, and having this like, okay, what we want to measure. Talking about KPIs and metrics, what would
and
be
also,
yeah.
Sorry, before you move on, deploying a tool like Asana will force you to map all the processes, have discussions with everybody, potentially simplify things. So even if you decide that Asana is not a right fit 3 months from now, then you've still done the work that's going to be useful for the next tool that you pick. That's why I would say usually go for it, start implementing Asana, because the work you're going to be doing because of the deployment will be useful anyway.
I totally agree. This is one of the upsides of deploying Asana. You will challenge of your processes. You will challenge all the tribal knowledge that has been sitting in the company for years or decades. And probably if the only outcome is that you challenge your processes and you review them and you improve them, then it's already a win. Even if Asana is not the final weapon of choice that you use to manage all these processes.
And it makes me, sorry, I keep on bouncing around ideas. It also reminds me, when you ask me about what's changed compared to a couple of years ago, I think the big difference is a couple of years ago, the clients were going from Excel to Asana. The difference now is that people are coming to us and they are already using a different tool, not Excel, something that they implemented already, like Monday, ClickUp, Smartsheet, whatever. And now they want to change. So they already failed at implementing a tool. And now it's your job to convince them that this time it's going to work. So it's a good thing because they've done the work internally of convincing people they need a tool, but also they failed already at using a different tool. So it's both harder and easier to sell them on the benefits of Asana. That's the big difference compared to before.
Why do companies fail to deploy other tools, and in which cases you think that something that has failed using Jira or Monday or ClickUp will
it's
not
usually
fail?
usually sponsor, budget, and time. It's usually this. They usually did not pick a partner. They did not train people properly, and they did not have the budget to get a partner involved. That's usually the case. The other reason is sometimes they pick a tool based on the feature coverage. So if you look at Monday, for example, you look at the website, it's all very shiny. There's lots of features. And if you compare with Asana, and if you look at a bullet point list of features, I think Monday has more features. But I think sometimes it's all being overly promoted. And it also makes the tool harder to adopt. And the adoption curve is a bit steeper with Monday. And we've heard people adopting Monday. It's harder to deploy. Asana looks a bit simple from the outside, but it's also easier to adopt across the board, across the company. So usually people went for a very specific, complicated tool. Like Smartsheets are good examples. They are very powerful, but also very hard to adopt. So usually we have to convince them to go to something simpler, but also easier to adopt.
Yeah, I would like to add to the conversation also something that for me it's crucial. It's conventions. Because when you are deploying a tool like Asana, it's not only a technology issue, it's also agreeing upon something. It's agreeing how are we going to name the projects, which custom fields are we going to use, because sometimes organizations fail to deploy this type of tools because it's like the Wild West. Every user have their own priority fields. Each user names the project how they feel, and it's not coherent the way they use Asana or the tool they were using. So I think it's also very important to understand that besides the technology and deploying the technology and having everyone their account and using them in their mobile devices, it's important that they have these conventions when it comes to these crucial features like naming, integrations,
Yeah,
when yeah.
you have to find the right balance. For example, one of my clients, they created a 50-page document explaining all the guidelines and conventions. Might be a bit too much, too extreme, especially when you just deployed. But I agree with you. You need to have some basic guidelines and conventions.
Yeah. We are in the end of this first episode. This will not be a podcast about Asana features, but I would like to highlight a feature that will help in this process. That's the custom onboarding process that in the enterprise licensing tiers organizations will benefit from. It's a feature that will help organizations to onboard to Asana new members. And I think that this is a very interesting feature to inform and to speed up the process to have new members on board with these conventions. Probably not a 50-page document, but having like the main topics covered. I don't know. What do you think about this option?
Um, I think this one specifically is a good one if you have a very big company and you onboard several people per week. If you have a small team, I guess you can still do things manually. The feature itself, I think, is irrelevant. What's relevant is how you're going to use the feature and what's within the onboarding project you will create. That's really where the value is. And I've been taking notes, and how to teach Asana how to onboard someone could be actually episodes
Sure.
we do.
We will link them in the screen. I don't know in which corner, but today I think it has been a good start. We hope that those that followed us in this first episode, now you know when it's the good moment to jump into Asana. Remember, you need a sponsor, you need the budget, you need the time, and we also discussed about the proof of concept. And next week we will continue our conversation with the later stages, like once you decide to deploy Asana, what is the best way to approach to the process. Anything else, Bastien?
I have at least 15 topics, so we have 15th episode we can record.
That's great, because to share, to be transparent with our audience, we weren't sure about this format, and these contents, but I'm totally convinced that it will be fantastic to share this adventure with you, Bastien, and the audience of Asana Champions that we expect to follow us in this and the next episodes. Thank you.
And and as you said, it's not going to be about features, even though we love discussing features. It's really going to be about onboarding, deploying, how much does it cost, how long does it take, best practices, all of that stuff that we also love.
Yeah, probably we will have some extra episodes where we can discuss about new features. But again, always happy to talk about Asana with you, and see you next week. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.